Welcome to the final video in my Battle Simulator tutorial series, and you can basically think of this project as done from the last time we were able to simulate this combat that's going on here, and really most of the work was in that last video. So today, all I want to do is polish off this project. If you're already satisfied with the simulator, you could actually stop here. All I'm going to do in this video is add user controls. I want to make it to where instead of manually having exactly 3 armies with exactly 200 soldiers each, I want to make it to where the user can, whenever they run the game, choose how many soldiers there are, what their stats will be, which were these parameters here, their health and maximum possible attack, as well as their team color. So this is going to be much simpler than the last video. We're just going to add some user controls, and a lot of it is going to be from main. So here's what we're going to do. From the main function here, what I want to do is first have it to where they need to type in, the user needs to type in the amount of armies that are going to fight. Well, but first let's give this a title. I'm going to print out a really nice looking game title like this, and I'll add Battle Simulator print, and I can actually copy this string here. So I just want to give some kind of output title for the Battle Simulator, add an extra line, and here's what we're going to do. So now that I have the title, I'm going to move the game over here. We're not going to create the main game yet. First, we need to tell how many armies are going to be and what those armies are going to be like. Then we're going to create the main game. So I'm going to put that there. So first, we need to get how many armies it will be. So I'm going to type num armies, and the user is going to type this in, is equal to int input, since we're inputting an integer, enter the amount of armies to fight. And so the user will get to pick 1, 2, 3, or even 0. So that will be the amount of armies to fight. And now the next part is a little bit more complicated. So each army has 4 characteristics. They have health of the soldier, the attack, maximum attack of the soldier, the color of the soldier, and the amount of soldiers for that army. These 4 characteristics are going to be for every single army. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a list. I'm going to call it army data, and it is an empty list. And what we're going to do is inside of this, we're going to be inserting other mini lists that contain the data for each army, which, like I said, is 4 different things. So this is all my army data in one list, but it consists of mini lists that will have the attack stats, the color. I'll just put it red as a string, num soldiers, maybe 30. This is what the lists are going to look like. So it's a list, but inside of the army data list is mini lists, which have each of the 4 characteristics of an army. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pass both the number of armies and the army data to the main game so that the main game can create these armies automatically. So I just wanted to show you this so you know how this is going to be structured. Army data is going to be an empty list, and we're going to have mini lists inside of it. So let's put it back to empty. And now that we know how many armies there are, let's run a for loop for I in range num armies. And now for every army that we have, we need to create that mini list. So I'm going to call this stats. This is going to be the mini list, and it's going to be empty. What we need, and I need to actually give it a size. We're going to do health, attack. Let's do num soldiers next, since that's a number, and then color last, which will be a string. Which, by the way, we're going to later write a class that will convert a name of a color into a RGB code. So we'll write that later. That's why we're going to just use the name for now. So there's our stats mini array that's going to go inside of the big array here. This is for the very first army. Now what we need to do is enter the health, attack, number of soldiers, and the team color. So I'm going to say stats 0 is equal to int input, enter the, in fact, let's format a little better. I'm going to say print enter the stats for army plus I plus 1. So basically this is going to say enter the stats for army 1, enter the stats for army 2, army 3, because I is going to be 0. Let's say I type in 4 for the amount of armies. I is going to be 0 to 3, so I want 1 to 4, so I just add 1 to I, and of course I have to convert that to a string so that we can print it. So this is all this is going to be is enter the stats for army number 1, army number 2, army number 3, and army number 4. If I just did I, it would be army 0, 1, 2, and 3, which wouldn't make so much sense. So, and then after that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type /t here. So now that we're going to input the health, I'm just going to type health and let the user input it. /t just means tab. So what it's going to look like is we're going to see in the output, enter the stats for army 1, but then we're going to see tabbed over health, and then you type the health here. And I think that's going to look nicer. So I'm going to tab over the stats. So the health is the first one, so we input the first one. Now let's input the maximum attack. Stats 1 is going to be int input and then /t attack. So we've entered the health and attack. Let's enter next the amount of soldiers that are going to be in this army. Int input /t soldiers, like that. And then finally the color. And the color is a string, so we don't need to put int input. We're just going to put input. Input returns a string. I was simply converting those to integers because our first 3 are integers. And again, if this is, some of this is kind of confusing, like stir, int, those are vanilla Python things, and perhaps you would want to refresh those before watching this video. Like I said in the first video, I'm assuming you're already familiar with Pygame, already familiar with Python. This project is just to give you an idea of what you can do with that knowledge. Okay, now we're going to enter the color, team color. And just like that, we have our stats for every single army. It's going to be health, attack, num soldiers, and then color. And now that we've populated, we've given the data to stats, what I'm going to do is add stats to the army data. Army data.append stats, like that. And of course, if I type in a 4 for num armies, this code is going to run 4 times, and every single army is going to have its own soldier stats like this. So we're done with this portion and pretty much all the code in main game. All we need to do now is we're going to create the main game just like we did and call its play function. But we're going to actually give the main game the number of armies and the army data. So let's hop over to main game and add those parameters so that we can get that data here in this file. Num armies and army data, like that. So at this time, I'd like to stop and just more thoroughly explain what we're about to do. So we've already created the num armies parameter and the army data list, which is going to tell us both how many armies there are and the characteristics of those armies, excuse me. So on Paint, I've created an illustration of that army data list. This is the army data list. It is a list with lists inside of it. So you can call it a 2-dimensional list like that. So here is one stats list. It is a list of all the stats of the red army. This is health, attack, the amount of soldiers, and the color. And of course, these are all just examples since, of course, the way we've coded it, the user can type in whatever they want. But in this Paint example I have here, I have already set them. So health, attack, the amount of soldiers, and the color. So this is my army data list, and each one of these mini lists is I'm just going to call it a stats list. What we need to do is we need to create the soldiers. We need to spawn in the soldiers, but it's no longer as simple as just creating a for loop for every army. We now no longer know that there's exactly going to be 3 armies with these stats. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create one for loop that's going to go through every item in army data. So it's going to look like this. Let me expand it. For And let's get some black text, please. For I in range num armies, or you could also just do length of army data, because those numbers are the same. Num armies. So for I in range num armies, that's a for loop that's going to go, in this case, 3 times, because that's the amount of armies there are. And that's the amount that the user typed in here. So then the next thing we need to do, if we want to spawn all the soldiers, we need another for loop that's going to account for the amount of soldiers in each army. So we need another for loop that's going to run 200 times, then 200 times again, then 200 times again. But how do we know exactly how many soldiers are in each army? Well, this whole thing is army data. That is the entire list. Now, the stats is going to be army data I. Let's just say I is 0 the first time. Army data I is going to give me just the stats for the red army. And army data I2 is going to give me the 200 in the stats. So let me say it again. Army data is the whole list of everything. Army data I is going to be one of these stats arrays, or excuse me, lists. I say array a lot because I first coded in C++, and that's what you would call these. But so army data I is one of these stats lists. Army data I2 is going to just be 0, 1, 2, the second element in these lists. So when we create our second for loop, we're going to say for j in range army data, let's spread this out, army data I2. That's going to be a 200 all 3 times. If this was a different number, it would of course reflect here. So we have a for loop that runs once for every army, then a for loop that will run 200 times based off of the amount of soldiers for each army. And then finally, it's in this for loop that we can type all that soldier spawning code that we had before, where we create a new soldier and append it to our soldiers list. But I wanted to explain more thoroughly this two-dimensional list and why we're doing it this way, and I hope that's not confusing, but we're going to proceed with the code here. So what we're going to do, we have num armies and army data. I'm just going to do exactly what I typed out here. We need our first for loop to go through each army. For I in range army, num armies. So that will go through each army. Now we need a for loop that will go through the amount of soldiers of each army. So for j in range army data I2. And now here I can basically copy and paste the code we had from these older for loops. I'm going to paste this here, and I'm going to delete all these old for loops because we don't need them anymore. So we're going to create a random x position, a random y. Then we're going to create the soldier, and all of this is okay, except instead, we no longer know there's just going to be 3 armies. So the team, instead of these constants, we're just going to delete it, and we're going to set the team to I. Because I, like just in that example, if I have 3 armies, I is going to be 0 for this time, 1, and then 2. And those are all unique numbers or different from each other. So if I make I the team, then it's going to work just fine. Now, we have a file path here, and that's because we wanted to render the soldier that file. But we need to make a change to the soldier class because we are no longer going to use the soldier textures. The reason why is I want it to where the user can just type in the color of that soldier. But of course, if we tried to use textures, we need to have a texture for every possible color the user could type in. And I think that's a bad idea. But in Pygame, you can draw rectangle objects without a texture. We have been drawing the texture at the position of the rectangle, but instead we can actually change that. So here's what I'm going to do. In the soldier class, I'm going to go down to the render function. we are no longer going to use the texture. Instead, we're just going to draw the hitbox. And since we're using squares for the soldiers, it's not going to make a difference. Window dot fill, that's what you use to draw the squares instead of a texture. Fill requires two arguments. It requires a color, which we don't currently have a color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hard code a color, and near the end of the video, we're going to actually fix it and change the color. Or no, I'll do it now. We're going to create a color private variable. So textures, we no longer need textures. We are just going to draw the hitbox. And then I'm going to add a color private variable. And I'm going to replace file path with color. So now in main game, we're going to put a color here, not just red soldier.png. So I've replaced that. Now that we have a color saved as a private variable, we can, inside this fill command, first put the color, self.color, then put the hitbox, self.hitbox. That's how you draw a rectangle object. You use fill, and you just need the color and the hitbox. Since we no longer have the texture, we don't need to use the blit command. And that's all the changes we need to make to soldier. We just got rid of the texture. Now we are just going to draw the hitbox with a certain color. So now we have our for loop here. And this is not quite the color we need. We need we're almost done with the soldiers. Like this would work almost, except we need to whatever color the user types in that's going to get saved in stats, we need to be able to draw the soldier of that color. But there is a problem. This color that's inside the stats list, or this color here, this is a string. The way we coded it is the color is a string. And so if I pass a string variable here, and I just call it red, if we passed in red, then we would try to draw with the string argument red, but that wouldn't work. We need a tuple, a RGB color code. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a class that will manage this color for us. What it's going to do is we're going to give the class the word red, and it's going to give us back 25500. And that way, whatever color that the user chooses over here when he types it in, we're going to be able to convert that color to an RGB color code and then send that RGB color code to the soldier. So let's write that class real quickly. And this is a really easy class to write. I'm going to add that new file, and I'm going to call it colors.py. And now here, we don't even need to import anything. We just need a class, and I'm going to call it color manager. Again, all this class is going to do is it's going to convert strings like red to an RGB color code 25500 so that we can draw soldiers. I'm going to create a constructor because I think you have to, but the constructor is not going to do anything. All really this color manager is going to do is it's going to give us a color. It's going to convert the color. So let's make that function, get color, and it's going to take as an argument a color name. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bunch of constants. I'm going to set red to be, well, let's start with black. I'm going to set black to be 0, 0, 0. And basically, we need to just create a whole bunch of these. So I'm just going to copy and paste several times. And I'm going to change all these to different colors. All right, so we have black, 0, 0, 0, white, 255, 255, 255. Let's do red next, 25500. Let's do green, which is 0, 255, blue, 0, 0, 255. Now let's do all those intermediate colors. Let's do cyan, which is going to be a mix of a mix of blue and green, 255, 255. So cyan is going to be 0, 255, 255. Yellow is going to be a mix of red and green, so 255 for red, 255 for green. And magenta is a mix of red and blue, 255, 0 for green, and 255 for blue. I'm going really fast here. You can, of course, pause the video. And now let's just add, I think I'm good with those colors. I'm just going to add gray. If you want to add more colors on your own, you can do that. And gray is going to just be 100, 100, 100. So those are the colors that I'm coding in. And here's what I'll do. What I'll do is for the getColor function, we're going to pass in the name of the color, and we're going to convert that color to one of these codes. So I'm going to just do a lot of if statements. If the color name, well, first let's make sure the user can type red with a capital R, red, red, capital D. They can do all kinds of nonsense like that. So let's make sure that color name is all lowercase. So I'm going to convert it. Color name is equal to color name dot lower, and that will convert it all to lowercase. So now I can type if color name is equal to red, and I know everything's going to be lowercase now, then we're going to return red. Else if color name is equal to blue. Did I really forget blue? Of all, oh no, I didn't. It's right here. Good. Return blue. Else if, and you can see where this is going, the color name is equal to green. Return green. Else if color name is equal to, let's do cyan next. Cyan. Return cyan. And then I'm just going to keep going here. We'll do yellow next. Return yellow. And then we'll do magenta. Return magenta. I think there's just two more, black and white. Color name is black. Return black. Finally, if the color name is white, we're going to return the white code. But what if the user makes a mistake when they're typing in the name of the color they want, and they put instead, they accidentally put something like white and accidentally use two T's? Well, we're going to add an extra statement. If they type anything that's not one of these options, then we're going to assume they misspelled it, and we're going to give a random color. So we're just going to create a random red, green, and blue color code. So the random red is going to be, and I do need to import random for this. Import random. The red is just going to be random.randint, a random number from 0 to 255. Random green is going to be the exact same. Random blue is going to be the exact same. So if the user types in something that's wrong, what we're going to do is we're going to return a tuple that is just a random color. Like that. So now every color is accounted for, no matter what name. Now we can convert a color to a code that we can use using our color manager class. I think I could have made this just a solitary function, and I might try to do that at the end of the video, but I'm fine with a color manager. We might expand this. So I'm going to import it in main, colors, import, color manager. I'm also just really used to adding a bunch of classes. And now we're missing one argument. Like I said earlier, we finished the for loop. This for loop is for every army. This J for loop is for all the soldiers in every army. And we're creating a new soldier, and we have his X, his Y, his size, the team he will be on, which will just be I. But now we need to modify the color and the health and attack while we're at it. I forgot about them. So let's just think back to our example. What is the color going to be for, or let's start with health. Health is always the first element in the stats array. So the health for a certain army is going to be army data I 0. That's health. So let's replace health with that. Army data I and then 0. And now this next one is attack. What is attack? Well, attack is the second one. That is the stats list. That's going to be army data I 1. So let's type that. Army data I 1. So now we're using what the user typed in for the health and for the attack. We have a team. Now we need the color. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a color manager. Color manager is equal to color manager. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, instead of, well, because soldier needs a color because that's his argument. We're going to draw off that color. So I'm going to type color manager dot get color. And what do we pass in as this argument? Did I name it get color? Yes, I did. So what we're going to pass in is army data I 4. Or excuse me, 3. Because that is the word, and we're going to convert that word to a color code. So with that, all of this here should be correct, and we should be able to get soldiers of different colors. All right, and now we're ready to run this code. So I'm going to click the play and drag the terminal up a little bit. Excuse me, not the terminal, the run. Terminal is something else where you can type Python code here. So it pulls up the nice title. We're back in main. It pulls up that nice title that we made, and it asks, enter the amount of armies you want to fight. So for now, I'm going to put 2, and we'll make it a battle between cyan and yellow. So I'm going to have the health be 100, attack be 30, soldiers be 100, and the color will be cyan. And just remember, even though this is a string, our color manager is going to find the word cyan and return the color code. So now I'm going to enter the next army, and I'm going to keep all the stats the same, except the color is going to be yellow. And when I click enter, the Python window pulls up, and the battle between the yellow and the cyan is going on. Now, ever since we stopped rendering the soldiers as textures and started rendering them as rectangles, they actually appear a little bit bigger. I suspect this is because the texture was surrounded by a little bit of alpha, so the box didn't fill the whole texture. So what I'm going to do is probably turn down the size of the soldiers, but you can see that the simulator is working here. Let's make the soldiers a little bit smaller. That just had to do with our textures. Let's make them 10. And now let's run it with some different data. I'm going to have 3 armies fight this time. And I'm just, for the sake of speed, I'm going to keep all these stats the same. I'm going to make the first army cyan. Then I'm going to keep all the army stats the same. Next color red. And then the next stats the exact same. Except I'm going to type a random color here, or just a mistake color name. And remember, from our code, this is going to give us a random color. But we're actually going to get a bug when we do this. So I'm going to click enter. It's going to create our battle. And notice what's happening. There's a pink guy here, a blue guy here, there's a green one here, gray one here. And so what's happening is the random colors for our army are actually random per soldier. And that's actually not correct. We want a random color to be assigned for a soldier, but we don't want we still want that whole army to have the same color. Let me run it again in case that wasn't super clear. I'm only going to have 2 armies to fight, and one of those is going to be a red army. And the next, so red. The next one, I'm going to give an invalid color name. So I'm going to type in nonsense, and watch what happens. Look at how many different colors there are. There's like yellow, there's a green, there's a dark blue, there's a purple, there's a green, another green over here. Because like I said, on accident, and I didn't even notice this bug in the code, but what we're doing is we're having the random color be picked for every soldier. So I'm going to make a slight tweak to this code. The way we're going to fix it is in that first for loop, we're going to create the color variable. Color is equal to color manager dot get color, and we're going to use whatever the user typed in, army data I3. And instead of randomizing every soldier, we're just going to randomize it every army. So I'm going to type color here instead. And with that, I'm going to open this up and hopefully we won't get that issue. Let's type in the same thing, 2 armies, and let's have the first one be red. Second one is going to be a randomized color. And now, look at this. Now the random army all have the same random color. It's a random color, but they all have the same. And that concludes my Battle Simulator tutorial series. I hope you enjoyed doing this, and I hope the explanations for this video made sense, since I realized this video is turning out to be much longer than I was planning on it. But it's also a really fun part of this project, because now you can do fun things like having one really overpowered army and then maybe have them go against 5 other armies that are way weaker. You can customize this all you want. And let's see, we no longer need the soldier textures, and so you can entirely get rid of those. But now enjoy your hard work, and thank you so much for watching to this point.